Before watching this screencast, you should have already seen the video from Bill Nye about Harry Hess and what he did with his fathometer during the war. Well, after after the war's over, Harry Hess goes back to Princeton and he figures out an explanation for the heat flow data and for the ridges. And what he figures out is going to be the mechanism that Wegener was missing. And you see a little picture kind of like what we're going to be drawing for explaining the mid-ocean ridges. In the mantle, we're going to use the word asthenosphere like we learned in the last section. There's Harry Hess. So what Harry Hess said was that there are convection cells in the asthenosphere, and those are pushing and pulling the continents apart, or the seafloor apart. So first what we need to do is talk about what a convection cell is. And before we get to what with it, it's the Earth, I'm going to do a simple example from history of what a convection cell is. So imagine that you're back in the mid-1800s in the United States. You are crossing the Great Plains going out west to strike it rich. Well, you get a little bit ways into the Great Plains and you realize, well, this isn't too bad of a place to live. You set up your sod house and you scratch out a living there. Well, it gets cold in the winter. So here is my house, very crude example of my house. So it gets cold in the winter. So you need to heat your house. Well, what do you heat your house with? You heat it with a stove. One of the specific types of stoves that they used was a potbelly stove. Well, where did they put this stove? They put it in the middle of the house. They put it in the middle of the house because they knew about convection cells, and they knew that by putting the stove in the middle of the house, it would heat the room. So you put some wood or coal or whatever you're putting in the stove, it heats the air. What does hot air do? It rises because it's less dense. So the hot air rises. It hits the ceiling and spreads out. Now it gets to the walls, it's a little bit cooler. Cold air falls. Like that. It hits the ground, it spreads again, it gets to the stove, heats up, and the process starts over again. So each of these is a convection cell. Each of these. So here is a convection cell right here. So two convection cells. Harry Hess said that is what is in the asthenosphere, and that is what is causing the seafloor to spread and then the continents to move. So what we need to do is now draw our Earth as we know it kind of today. So a very simplified picture. I'm going to put the hard outer layer of the Earth. What's the hard outer layer of the Earth called? Lithosphere. So go ahead and label it lithosphere. Underneath the lithosphere is the plastic part of the Earth. Go ahead and label it asthenosphere. Where does the heat come from in the Earth to create this convection cell? The heat comes from the core. So somewhere down here, go ahead and put the core. And something you might not know is we think there are some hotter spikes on the core because of radioactive decay of some uranium. So there's a little hot, so put a hot spike on the core. Well, right above that hot spike, so that hot spike is hot, it's going to heat the magma in the asthenosphere. When the magma gets hot, what's it going to do? It's going to rise up because it's less dense. So the magma gets hot and it rises up. It hits the underneath the lithosphere. Harry Hess said, well, is it possible to melt a little bit through the lithosphere here and make that valley in the mid-ocean ridge, make it hot? Okay, the heat flow data that we were talking about. Well, sure. Once this magma has risen up to the top, what's it going to do? It's going to spread to either side. I should be doing this in a different color. Let me get some red. So it heats up, spreads to oh, that was bad. Spreads to either side. Like that. As it spreads to either side, what happens? If we have the seafloor here, the seafloor is going to then spread to either side. And if the seafloor spreads, what are the continents going to do? Well, the continents are going to spread apart also. Okay. Then once this magma is cool, it goes back down to heat over again. Now this rises very slowly, 1.5 inches a year maybe, so very slowly rising. So remember, it's really thick. It's like a thick peanut butter. So as it spreads to either side, could there be enough friction to push and pull those continents apart? A little lava would work its way up through and create the mid-ocean ridge in the valley? Well, sure, it could happen. And that's a much better mechanism than what Alfred Wegener had with the continents, or with the moon. So that's what Harry Hess said. We see it in the picture here. Again, the heat from the core causes the magma to rise. The magma in the cenosphere is going to spread. It's going to dive down at the trenches. Okay, we're going to talk more about that later. I'm calling it slab pull. So it pushes and pulls it apart, creates the valley and the ridge. Some lava comes up, makes it hot, and it makes our mid-ocean ridge. Some proof of that. This is a newer picture here. This is showing heat in the earth, and it actually shows this. It shows hot magma rising up, hitting the lithosphere, spreading, cooling in the trenches, and diving back down. It's pretty amazing. So we really have evidence of this for the Earth. So that's what Harry Hess said. We can see in the animation up here at the top what's happening. The lava comes out, that seafloor spreads to either side, creating our mid-ocean ridge and our valley at the top. So we get our theory here. Convection cells in the asthenosphere cause the seafloor spread as rising magma pushes and pulls the continents apart. Thus, new ocean floor is created at the valleys, while old ocean floor is recycled at the trenches. So here's a little reading about this. So Harry Hess, back at Princeton, began to wonder what this all meant. Could it be, Hess asked, that the Long Valley was a rift in the crust of the Earth, from which hot rock was continually rising upward from deep within the interior? Could it be, he continued, that this upwelling rock made its way through the rift as the seafloor spread apart to either side? If so, he thought, the entire Atlantic seafloor might be moving, half towards the west and half towards the east. Hess saw the result as sort of a conveyor belt, actually twin conveyor belts, one traveling west, the other east. The upwelling rock is forever creating fresh ridge and new ocean crust, which then moves away from the ridge as it travels across the bottom of the sea at centimeters per year. When it reaches a barrier like the edge of a continent, it's forced beneath the barrier and dives deep beneath the crust, there to be melted down again, and was dubbed seafloor spreading by the geologist Robert Dietz. So what we need to do now is we need, again, to prove that he's right. This is a much better mechanism than Wegener had, but we need to prove some things. First of all, we need to prove this down, if I can find it, this down here. We need to prove that the ocean floor is young in the valleys and old in the trenches. We don't know that yet. Remember, they didn't know much about the ocean floor, and they thought it was all really, really old, flat, cold. Well, we know it's not cold, We know it's not flat. Now we need to figure out about the age. We also need to check it and make sure that it is spreading. So we need to make sure that it's symmetrical on both sides of the valley. And to do that, or the evidence for that, is going to come from kind of a weird field called paleomagnetism. So we're going to talk about paleomagnetism in the next part.